Hello, everybody. Welcome. PBS Wisconsin Education bringing you AKA Teacher. My name's Joanna Rosado, and I'm super excited to be joined today by my fellow co-host. Would you guys take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Daniel Torres Rangel. I'm an educator of 16 years. I've been in public charter and private schools in roles everything from teacher to administrator. And I now work for the local district in the research and innovation team.
Ooh, research and innovation. I love it.
Hello, my name is Shelton Evans. I'm a lead facilitator for a nonprofit. I do affinity groups with kids of color, and I also build cultural bridges for teachers to provide effective student-teacher relationships for those students and help those teachers, empower those teachers as well.
And I'm Angie Humphrey. I am a high school science teacher. This is my 15th year of teaching in Middleton, Wisconsin.
And I should have added for myself. I'm Joanna, and I'm an alternative education teacher who works in the Milwaukee metro area. So, hey guys, we are together and here we are at it. Part of this is to kind of share with everybody different facets of the world of education. And wow, what a great group we have to represent. We hope that our audience connects with us and enjoys it too. But to get started out, just how are you? What are some of the hats that you've worn just very recently? How's everybody doing? Angie.
Well, I'm doing really well. I literally just got home from a soccer game for one of my daughters 30 minutes ago. Now, education, school, that's kind of my happy place. And so now even this right here is kind of like compartmentalize and go. So I'm feeling really great. Daniel, how about you?
Yeah, I also soccer today, but in terms of education, I working at the district level, we've all been supporting schools these first couple of weeks of the schools being back. And I was supporting at a middle school and wore the hat of a substitute teacher, which is a role that not only substitute teachers are playing, but many staff within schools. We know teachers, staff members wear so many hats during the day. And we know that substituting, filling in here and there, all hands on deck is something that's happening everywhere.
My role is a little different, non-traditional. So being a lead facilitator, I usually when I take I like to we, I take the kids out of class. So I like to let them get acclimated the first few weeks of school. So I'm not really in the schools yet, but I am meeting principals and establishing calendars and meeting things like that. And this year, I've been facilitating all the groups, and now I have a co-facilitator. So that's very exciting. I'm very excited about that, just to train that person and coach that person, give me a little break so I can focus on admin and staff.
And myself, oh gosh, getting started and thinking of the different hats. Lately, I've been actually really tuned in to my own daughter. I have a daughter who's in high school and all that's going on with, trucking her to and from her events. And she goes to school in a different district that I work in. So that's always, figuring out, can I be there on time? Can I do this on time? And that's all starting to get settled. And then within my classroom, I kind of have a non-traditional setup where I'm not just in charge of a class. I'm in charge of like this program in this little school. So same thing. It's a little more involved, figuring out entrance, exit, lunches, some of the things that are normally taken care of by the larger school, the logistics. So, right, it's the beginning of the school year. Here we go, right? What has it been like these first couple of days? Let's chat about it. We come out of that summer and we go into the school year. And it's something I think that is actually hard for people to understand because they don't know that other people's schedules really work like ours does. Or they think it's like, they think of it in kind of a fantasy way, where I always say, man, sometimes it is hard to get what I call slammed back into the school year because you kind of go from your own thing to something that's like very fast paced and very structured. But I am just curious and want to talk to all of you guys to hear wherever we're at in all of our positions throughout the state, like what what is it like for that return? What are some things that like go through your mind or that you participate in? Um, what do you do?
Well, I'm super pumped to be that participating in that transition back because honestly, it's by this time that I'm kind of ready to stop hanging out with my own children and get them to school with the experts that know how to rear and educate 7, 8, and 4 year olds, and then get back to my happy spot with the high schoolers. And so it feels like really good and energizing to be spending time thinking about what the curriculum is going to look like, thinking about how we're going to make things work. And then we've got a bunch of new staff in our science department. And so then just thinking about how we're going to onboard those staff, make them feel welcome, help them kind of get into like, what is the culture of our school? What's the culture of our department? And kind of like how we do things curriculum wise. And so it's kind of fun to like just dive into that water, I feel like, and just start to get excited.
Well, I'll say this summer was unique to me in it was the first summer that I felt I really needed.
Yes.
Last school year was really hard for me, and I had never really been a person to count down. So even when I think about going into it, like I was counting down last year because I really had kind of run out of energy. And so the summer itself was very restorative, and my plan was to not have a plan, and so again, typically I do a lot in the summer, professionally. I do a lot for my union, um, and I really had the calendar pretty open in terms of that kind of stuff. So my summer in its entirety was very different for me in preparing for this school year. It was the time that I just did really need a break, and some distance. And so thinking about coming back was also though kind of okay because I was just kind of like I have to be in the like I was in the moment every day this summer, and then I was like I'm going to be going back, and I didn't want to do some of the things I had done before. So then on the other hand, in the past too, I used to do a countdown to when I went back to work. Right. Especially when I had young kids like you, Angie, where I'd be like, oh my God, there's only this many days left, and so I also didn't do that. I was just kind of like, I'll show up the day I have to show up, and I'll be ready. So for me, this summer in particular, and me getting ready was very different than the past, and I'm hoping that's a good thing.
To double back off of that, last year, the last couple years, as we all know, was a little heavy. So, like you, Joanna, this summer, well, let me start with this. I wanted to quit working in schools. Like, I
Yeah.
literally got two other well, I had another job, then another local agency offered me another job, so I was ready just to be done because I was over it. But then as the summer goes on and school starts to approach, I get that itch again, and I'm like, I got to stop making emotional decisions after school is over. So I learned a very valuable life lesson. But yeah, so it's been a very subtle summer. I would say just staying present, not doing much, and focusing on me. A lot of health and yeah, reading and spiritual stuff and yeah. So, but very excited to get back
Yeah.
started to school for
Interesting that
sure.
we have that connection because I was in the same place where I'm like, what am I doing? Okay. What am I going to do? What am I going to do
So
with
like
my life?
yes.
Yeah, Shelton, as you were saying, it's been a rough couple of years, as we all know. And something I'm excited about is the lessons learned that everyone's taking into this year. During COVID, during the pandemic, we're in this weird phase where it seems like it's over, but we're still in it. So I say during it as if it's over, but it's not over. What did we turn to for our own wellness? People got outside, people were going on walks, connecting with the outdoors. They were doing art projects at home, get into the arts and outdoors and projects. And I'm excited for the spaces that are really emphasizing those and doubling down on arts education, outdoor education, project based learning, and not seeing these as add-ons anymore or enrichment, but actually part of the core curriculum. And in addition to that, just reestablishing connection with each other and really doing that by listening and listening to student voices and centering them and all of those things that we do to take care of each other and ourselves.
And I think that's so important what you just said about reconnecting with the students and just letting them center themselves, get their voices back. Because I think a lot of them went through things through COVID, social and emotionally, that they're not even aware. They didn't even have the words to say what it was, but the behaviors start translating sometimes. So I think that was a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah, for me, when it's the summertime, I kind of find this happy balance between, I always say summertime Angie is like up for anything. So, like a weekday cookout, let's do it. Like concerts on the square, home by 9 p.m., I'm in. And then, like, school year Angie is like, it's a weeknight. Bedtime is like 8. We better be eating by 6. Come on, we got to keep things moving. But summertime Angie, she's like up for anything, anytime. And so I just really try to revel in that, like, oh, I'm up for anything on this like calendar. What are we doing? Should we have a bonfire? I don't even care that it's Thursday. Like,
That's what's up.
Yeah, I know I did do a lot of just meeting with friends. That's something that kind of really fills me up. And in the same way, honestly, it was a lot of educator friends where kind of has your summer Angie vibe where I'm like, go out to lunch on a Wednesday and get wine. Let's do it because we can. Where you feel like you can be in the world is what I'll say. So I do a lot of time with friends. And then I do like to go up north a lot. I love going up north Wisconsin, and now one of my best friend moved up there, so it makes it nice and easy. Um, in terms of I don't have to book a place to stay. I really can roll up. And so I like a lot of time outdoors. And then I have also been reveling in just being with my own children. I might have shared at some point. I have a son who is a he's a senior in college this year, and I keep kind of counting down to how many years is he really going to come home in the summer? And so this summer too, I just really enjoyed being with my kids in like the everyday ways. Like when they were younger, I did plan a lot of events and activities. And this summer it was more kind of like, right, just being at home, like let's cook breakfast, let's hang out kind of stuff. It was really important to me.
is there summertime Daniel? What's summertime Daniel look like?
Summertime Daniels outside, getting darker in the sun, uh, and a lot of kids' activities. My kids are 5 and 7.5, so it's a lot of staying energized through them and staying moving through them. Started rock climbing recently,
Oh.
so always adding new things to the repertoire.
Daniel, what does your schedule look like in this summer? Because you're in a slightly different role than like myself. What do you have to work in the summer?
I recently transitioned, so with this new role, that is to be determined.
TBD, good.
This next part of the show is called True Story, where we'll each get a chance to share a personal experience related to today's topic. So, fellow podcasters, it's a new year, beginning of a new year. Do you have any educational stories or any fun stories or any experiences you went through or something that you didn't know when you found out that you've learned already this year that you want to share? And I guess I can start while you're thinking. Me personally, as I keep mentioning, my role is non-traditional, so I have the luxury to recreate myself every year. So every year I get the opportunity to approach my job different. So I used to do a lot of group work, but now after the pandemic, and I have some coaching certifications, so I like to do some one-on-ones and get down and like I say, get those kids back motivated and establish goals that they can reach to get them feeling good about reaching short goals and things like that. So just the opportunity I love going to work and just getting to be myself because I work with a lot of kids of color. So my job is to teach what I live basically. So, and what I don't know, I get to learn from them or pull from other people. So do anybody else got a educational experience they want to share?
Shelton, I'm curious as a follow-up question that's been part of your work in the past of meeting one-on-one, working really closely with youth and having them set goals. I'm wondering if you find that their goals have shifted any, coming out of this summer or the past few years, going into this next year. Are they focusing on different things? Are they setting different goals for themselves? Are they
Yeah.
similar, different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say previously when I used to do goals, it was more, I want to do better in school. I want to get good grades. It was more academic. But now it's been a shift of feeling. I just want to feel better. I want to, the curriculum, I want it to reflect me. Why am I the only Black person in my class? Or when we talk about Hispanic, everybody turns around and look at me. So I think it's more getting towards feelings, and they want to feel like they belong, and they don't have that sense of belonging. So I think sometimes that when they go in that environment, the school environment, it's a trigger sometimes to remind them of what they're not and what they lack. So I think that feeling is starting to reoccur a little bit heavier than
Well,
before,
and
in
that
my
trigger
opinion.
that you
It's a
that
great
trigger
question.
that you mentioned for them was actually what I wanted to share is a trigger for me in terms of when I think about coming back and my process of coming back, kind of my true story part is that too. Like I show up like kind of ready, full of excitement. And I am not even kidding you guys. Within about 3 hours this school year, I was like, oh, yeah, oh no, it's all this. And because my work on myself and in my program is focused on that external kind of stuff that you mentioned, Shelton, that the kids are literally asking for. And yet everything that a school and that you're going over, especially at the beginning, is all the external circumstances. And if there's anything that we've learned is that like external circumstances don't necessarily change your internal condition. And so right. There really is just this mismatch, and I was feeling it for myself. Again, when I kept talking about, like, my quest this summer of, like, it's my own internal needs that aren't being, like, greatly met by kind of, like, the system and structure that I work for. Not my specific work with students, but I felt that again coming within a few hours of being back because my experience is that it's, like, all these, again, logistical meetings and it's not what I need, it's that's not what I showed up excited for, I wanna talk about how do we make people feel more welcome, and there's something kind of, like, really I mean, that is the thing, there's something pretty really unhealthy right now, and we have to move beyond for ourselves and our students, the whole, like, we're gonna self-care our way out of it or positive self-talk, uplift it, it's like, so coming back kind of my true story to share is that like the weight of our condition I kind of really felt in terms of turnover. Some of you were mentioning, right, the amount of people who are turning over. And then just what I see as like maybe the disconnect between the practitioners and what my priorities are and then like what the system or what management is telling me the priorities are as we start out.
Just to interject, I love how you use the system and you differentiate you and the system and how the system is a different thing than what you're really there for. So man, I
And
love
I
that.
felt
I love
that.
that.
That was me coming back being like, "Okay, I've been in the
Mhm.
moment." And then it lasted about I'm not kidding, it was about 3 hours. I kept track.
Shoot. That's a bummer.
Man, yeah.
That system needs to
Well,
change. You need to
right.
feel good for more than 3 hours.
Well, or that's where it just settled in after about 3 hours.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my true
You're
story.
reminded I feel like well, and I feel like it's like, you're excited, you have this energy, and then you're reminded of like, "Oh, yeah, I gotta set up my grade book. Oh, yeah, I need to start doing, like, the emails. Oh, I already need to start registering parent contacts into Infinite Campus." Like, you are starting to reminded of, like, the to-do list that just lives right here as you're, like, just enjoying the kids and doing fun stuff with the kids. You're like, "Oh, crap, don't forget about that to-do list back here."
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how we're at the beginning of the school year and we're talking about how hard the job is, and especially during the pandemic, it's been really rough. And what we're all doing to take care of ourselves and just thinking about new people who are new to the profession coming in, and it's hard enough being an experienced educator coming into the year and saying, how is it only the first 2 weeks? How is it only Labor Day? It feels like May. Um, and being a new to the profession and saying, what have I gotten myself into? I think more and more, if you're I've been shifting my focus to who is there.
Mhm.
It's so easy to focus on uh, staffing shortages or mass exodus from the teaching profession, but schools are up and running. Teaching and learning is happening, right? Light bulbs are going off. Beautiful moments are happening every day because people are still there, right? From teachers to nurses, substitute teachers, cross categorical teachers, right? Bus drivers. I mean, you name it, building staff. And I think more and more people are entering the profession knowing what they're getting into because it's out there in the
Mhm.
media. People are hearing that teachers are overworked, they're underpaid and underappreciated. They're reading about these staff shortages, and right now they're reading about learning loss. They're seeing schools question and address systemic racism. And any one of these issues is a lot to take on, let alone being new to the profession. So I think anyone who is in a school right now, whether you're new to the profession or you came back, they have their sleeves rolled up. They're ready to go. They know what they're in for. I mean, you still might have moments where you're saying, "What have I gotten myself into?" But I think people are ready to go, and there's a lot of power and hope to harness behind that.
Well, and when I share, how I am feeling, or I think it is important to note that I think it's that awareness that is healthy. Like I'm understanding where I'm at and what my thoughts are. Um, so right, I hope like our audience doesn't hear it and just think like, oh, she's bombed 3 hours in, and that just means that the whole year's gonna suck. Like, no. But to be honest, I've actually really worked on that awareness, and I think it's a healthy part of working through all of the things that you just mentioned. Because with that awareness comes like, right, what is my part of it, and that I'm in control of, and what is something that I've got to connect with others in community to chip away at. So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Have you guys ever seen that TV show Abbott Elementary?
Yeah.
I've seen a couple
It's
episodes.
it,
Yeah.
it's a real like it's got like a office vibe to it where they're interviewing the characters kind of midway. It's a good sitcom, touchy, like makes you feel good as you watch it. And there's like in that show there's like a first year teacher that's like classic first year teacher, like trying to do everything, like doing more than they need to, maybe even fumbling because they just never stop. And then there's like some seasoned teachers that this first year teacher is like, oh, why aren't you doing more? Like, and one of the seasoned teachers says, like, I know I can't do more because I can't afford to be burnt out. Because if I get burnt out, these kids have no one. And so I have to take care of myself. I have to not do everything because if I do, these kids won't have a teacher. And when I watched that episode, I was like, oh, I agree. Write it down because like our kids need
Yeah.
us. And like at the end of the day, I have to be like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to think about school at all this whole weekend. I'm probably going to still, but it's like, if I just pretend like I won't, like, I know that I'm striving for balance because like my kids need my student kids, my kids need me on Monday to be my best version of myself, bring the energy, bring the excitement to even a boring topic because they need me.
Yes. So you all mentioned being overworked because I know we have some listeners who probably they hear that a lot, but they really don't know what that entails. Can you all like explain some of the overworked things that happen throughout your day or year?
Well, I do have a funny, this would be a classic, like beginning of school year feeling overworked. So it's like day 4 of school and we just had back to school night, like meet the teacher kind of night. And it started at 9 p.m. or no, it started at 7 p.m. and got done at 9:09 p.m. and there's school the next day. And I feel like that's a classic one where you're like, who is asked to like work a solid 8-hour day, then like go home for maybe a little bit and then come back and like put on that face again for a couple more hours, now to parents, and then and then go home and be like, okay, I need to like slow down. I need to get some sleep here, and then be right back at it in the morning, ready to go.
Yeah.
And I love that it was 9:09. That's school too. Like, who else does that?
Yeah.
Count those minutes.
Gotta get those minutes in. I was just gonna say.
To Shelton, to your question, I'm not necessarily thinking of myself, but I mentioned that I was able to support a school earlier this week, and in one of the class was being supported by multiple teachers, a reading teacher coming in and doing reading assessments with the students. And there was also a special education teacher who came in and was supporting students. And she and I had the chance to chat a little bit after the class was over. And she was talking about how, again, first 2 weeks of school, it seems like it's May. She put in 15,000 steps the other day, and this wasn't a field trip. This was just literally running around the building, supporting every student on her caseload. And then all of the documentation after that, talking about being there till 7 p.m., writing emails to families, working on the documentation.
Wow.
And I just kept thinking about those 15,000 steps during the day too. I don't think that was an anomaly. I think that's every single day.
When I think about a lot of the ways that I feel like I'm doing a lot of work, it's a little bit different because I do a lot for my local association. And so it's voluntary, and yet I'm like, okay, if districts themselves weren't such a mess, our association work wouldn't be so intensive in terms of really helping people understand what their rights are. You know what I mean? What their workday really is and isn't, how we really establish kind of the collegiality amongst ourselves. So we plan outings and get-togethers, the kind of things that like can never be like fit into a school day, or they think, maybe like a half a cousin sub and a bag of chips is okay at school. That's the only thing we could do, and so we plan the more like adult and real things, to really again build a community of professionals. And so a lot of my time this week was that it's like the work day ends at this time, but I'm on the phone with people. Well, in fact, I helped somebody resign already. I'm on the phone with people, helping them figure out what to do. I'm, helping people just figure out their situation. And then we have this great leadership team. So anyway, I just think about that, whereas like the school day ends here, but then my work with my colleagues continues. And I just think because there's like, we just kind of like have roles in school, but there's really kind of not, at least been my experience the past 27 years, not a whole like organizational vibe. And if so, it's been like kind of just compliance driven.
What do you mean when you say roles?
I mean, like, here's school, and then you hire teachers and their teachers, and then you hire, your admin and their admin, and you hire your paras. And there's really not time or a real effort in how are you really a team? It's more like, here's your duties, here's my duties. How do you, these are the duties I have to do. And again, it's that internal need that we're missing with people of like, but what's the organization and how are we a team? And is there even time to ever really be together? So I just see that missing in the structure. And in my case, that's where my association picks it up.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think the past 2 years have taken that even further away, because I feel like at my school, we had, pre-COVID, we had a really good staff culture and staff energy that worked well with each other, that did really include all the different levels and all the different departments, from teachers to student support staff. And then you had COVID, which separated us. And then it was difficult to kind of maintain that. And then with that comes a lot of staff turnover. And so when it came time to come back last year, there was almost like a guard up. Like you weren't quite ready to know who you could trust. Maybe you didn't give. I mean, I know for a fact that there was a scenario where I didn't give a staff member as much grace as I should have. And then I kind of got called on it.
Mm.
And I was like, why would I give them grace? I don't even know them.
Mm-hmm.
I've been here for a long time. And it wasn't cool. Like I was out of line. But like I said to my administrator, I said, we need more community
Right.
so that we can have more opportunities to remind ourselves that these are our colleagues. This is our community. I trust what you're doing, even if I don't know all the pieces, because I know you've got kids at the best interest here. I know that I need to presume those positive intentions. And so my dream is that we'll get back to an opportunity for a stronger community so that we can get back to that, presuming everybody's putting kids first. Everybody's doing their best work to put kids first. And we have trust there, even if we don't know each other as well as we did pre-COVID.
Yeah, I feel pretty lucky that the team I'm on is working on innovation within the district and has learned that it only works if these projects are working directly with schools and with teachers, and in some cases with students, and talking with them and listening to them, because I think oftentimes there's a disconnect. And unfortunately, it's not hard for someone at the district level to hear about the struggles and about the hardships because they're simply not hearing it. So
Wow.
I think, how can we better communicate with each other? Joanna was talking about in schools and just teams within schools working together. How do we all fit together and communicate with each other? And sometimes you hear that people are left in silos.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we get better doing that at the district level? I think is still a big question that we're figuring out.
And how do you help someone who feels like they're in a silo too? I think when you do begin to talk to people and you hear about that how do you support them when you already have so much stuff on your own shoulders to take care of? Let's move on to our look back segment of the podcast. What is maybe something that's going well for you right now, or something you feel like you're doing really well? And maybe what's something that like you already know, I need to do better at that, or this is my goal this year on what I want to work on. Does anything come to mind?
Well, I could say, I think for myself, something that I know I do well is I'm really proud of the way that I start the school year and that I begin to start the school year with my families. I do intake meetings, which is not very common at high school level, but that's an important part of our program. And where I literally meet with the child and the family before they start to talk about just how did summer go? What are they hoping for this school year? What are they worried about this school year? And then some basic logistics, like literally like how are you getting to school? And because then we can talk and share perspective, because so many assumptions are made, like a little thing I always think about too is like my kids who ride bikes. Like I'll have kids who ride bikes to school, and also I'll be like, what are you going to do to how are you getting to school this year? They'll be like, I'm riding my bike. I'm like, okay, well, just so you know, you can bring it right in our room. Like I have like this external door nearby. So I just have them bring it right in the room because, right, I've learned years past, like, I'm like, oh my God, there's a bike in the bush. And it'd be one of my kids being like, oh yeah, I hide my bike in that bush. And I'd be like, oh, so these are the kinds of things you find out when you just talk about it in advance and that are very important to kids. Like they want to know how to walk in the
Yes.
door and not look like a fool. They want to know that. And
Yeah.
so that's something that I'm
Yes.
really proud that I start my school year that way. And I would love a high school redesign where we all do something like that. Because right, it's so important to adolescents to like walk in like knowing, and if you listen to them, that is where all their worries are, right? Is, they're actually not worried about your class, and they're worried about how are they going to look? What are people going to think? Do they know where they're going? And so something I know I do well is those intake meetings and getting my kids feeling solid and confident when they're coming in. Something I know that I think I got I always have to work on is remembering that no one else in my school is really doing that. And talking with other colleagues in a way that's not like, duh, you should be doing stuff like this, and kind of understanding what, again, that how that system limits them too into how they're
Yes,
going about
yes.
things. So something I know I need to work on is that kind of like, and I'm not mean to people, but I'm just saying like that compassionate lens of, um, yeah, they're doing a different thing. And I want to build that bridge for the small ways over, but I know that's, I'm very focused on my work and my space, what I just kind of talked about. And something I've got to work on too is understanding where everybody else is coming from.
I definitely hear that, Joanna. It's very similar to me too. It's almost listening on both ends. I think something that's going well is listening, and in particular, and this comes through the work of Elena Aguilar from Bright Morning Team, just doing a lot of reading there, and whether it's reflecting on your own practice as an educator or coaching teams or leading PD, she encourages you to really lean into emotions for the purpose of uncovering unmet needs. Because if you can uncover those unmet needs, then that's really what education is all about, right? Is then figuring out how can we meet those needs. And especially in one-on-one situations, if that you are able to uproot and uncover those emotions and talk about them together, you can build trust. And I think it goes a long way. But Joanna, similarly to what you were saying, I think something I have trouble with sometimes is having patience and truly listening when I feel the other person, when there's a fundamental difference between what we believe in. And I think on a macro scale, that's happening too. There are issues, and people, you're on one side or another. You think we should be teaching this in schools, or you think we shouldn't be teaching this in schools. You think schools should be organized in this way, or it shouldn't be organized in that way. You think bathrooms should be set up one way, or bathrooms should be set up another way. You think,
Yeah.
certain sports should be organized this way, and it's so polarized. And I admit at times it is hard to reach across the table and truly listen when there does appear to be a fundamental difference. But if that's something we don't work on, it's going to continue to become more polarized, and we're going to feel more distance between us. And unless we can find common ground, we're not going to move forward together.
Uh,
But it's hard.
yeah, yeah. And I'd say what I do well, I can relate to the kids or the youth that a lot of kids don't, a lot of the adults in the building don't think they can relate to. And those are kids what they call at risk, but I like to think of them as high promise, because how you think about things is how you see things, and that's how you treat it. So I like to always call them, they have high promise, and I treat them as such. So I think I build relationships with those kids very well because I see me in a lot of them and some of their experiences they've gone through, and some experiences I'm going through personally and just have been through. So that relation, that builds a different kind of relationship where they trust me, and I get called brother, dad, cousin, uncle. So to build those kind of relationships in the school, I love it. And then I'm privy to different information that a lot of people, I'm privy to the truth a lot, how kids are really feeling. Because sometimes they don't trust, as you all know, they don't trust people because the confidentiality has been broken or things like that. So just having that opportunity to build that rapport is a blessing. Um, I would say what I need to work on, like you all were saying, not as far as listening, but my emotions after I hear what's going on. Like, especially when it's about the kids that I
Mm,
work with, I go personal first, if I'm
mhm.
being honest. So I have to pause and step back. And sometimes I got to give myself a day. And then I'll tell them I'll come back tomorrow and I can answer, because it just hits home so hard. And I love hard, I hurt hard, and I heal slow. So with that equation, I have to take my time. But the greatest thing I've learned is um, the greatest way to learn something is to admit you
Mm.
don't know. Like every day I go in there and try to look for something I don't know because that's an opportunity to learn. So especially from them, and that puts that child on a pedestal in which they don't feel like they've been put on a pedestal for whatever reasons throughout the day or in life.
Love it.
We want to make sure every podcast episode, we don't just hear from the four of us. We want to open it up and we want to incorporate a variety of voices. So now we're going to move on to our Pass the Mic portion of the episode and see what questions or stories teachers have to share with us today. We'll take questions from early career or pre-service teachers or hear unique stories from veteran teachers. So we're just going to do a quick check of who is with us today. Today we have a story from Amy from Sussex. And Amy says, I work very closely not only with my second graders, but with their families as well. So we get to know the family at a very deep level in our virtual space. Amy is a virtual teacher, much more than I did as a classroom teacher for 15 years. I have students who have lost parents to COVID, students who have ADHD or autism, and the traditional classroom doesn't work for them, so they choose us. One parent I was talking to this week broke down and says he knows his daughter is behind and needs my help, but cannot send her to in-person school after what happened in Uvalde. He doesn't feel safe sending her. And so that's what Amy sent us. Thank you, Amy, for sending that in. And just to open it up to us, what came up for you in listening to Amy's story? How important is it for you to make connections with your students?
Overall, for me, what I heard was the ways education needs to change. Some things we need to rethink how we're teaching kids because we're not keeping in mind the traumas that they go through that they're not even aware that they can't translate, and how it plays on them social emotionally. So just the different ways that kids may need to start learning. And I don't know, that's heartfelt. It's heartfelt. But building relationships, again, that's the key.
Well, that's what made me think about too is part of the is the trust we need to rebuild with parents. Like they've been affected too. And that's what I heard in the story was again because ultimately these educational decisions for the children were based on their parents. And it's all fine, it's all good, and yet it's like there is something there. I always talk about like we assume so much in education where we're just like, of course, everybody wants to send their kids to a brick and mortar school. But it's like, no, I mean, I always say there's thousands of kids. There need to be more than one way. And so you hear that.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
just hear too, like the parents, of course, they have emotions too. And what do we have
Yeah.
built within to do that? And I loved hearing that she felt that she has stronger connections virtually than in person because I felt that way too during virtual. I think it depended on what you were doing. And like I didn't want to be virtual forever, but while it was happening, we made the best of it and we did have a community and I did feel close. And so I know that it's possible for people who are choosing that, for it to meet their needs. So those were some things that came up for me. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I'd say props to Amy for just being in that role. I would not volunteer for that. And so I guess maybe when I hear all of that, I really admire that she feels and that she's observing those tight relationships with the kids virtually because I feed off that in the classroom. And I love those relationships that I build with my students. So I'm thankful that she's able to find that. My hope is that she isn't living in that silo that we were talking about earlier, where I hope she's not teaching in her basement by herself.
Yeah.
I hope she's got a community of other virtual teachers or something that she can go to, because I think that it's when most teachers I know are social beings and they like the energy that comes around working with kids. And I hope that she is getting that social connection that she needs because she's got something good going on, it sounds like. And we need her to stay a teacher for a really long time because there's kids' needs that need to be met. And it sounds like she's meeting them. And so I hope she's getting what she needs so that she can have a long profession doing this role.
Absolutely. And we're talking about, this as relates to building trust and really relationships, and not just the interpersonal relationships, but the relationship to
Mhm.
school and education, and from the student's perspective and from the family's perspective as well. And another important issue here is safety, and that the safety of everyone in schools has to be a priority. And whether it's connected to a sense of belonging and feeling safe in terms of your identity, like we were talking about earlier, or simply your physical safety, whether it's due to COVID or what we're seeing in the media with school shootings, safety is a number one priority. And I'm curious, how do all of you feel about your own safety as an educator and also the safety of your students?
Well, we had an active shooter last year in January. It was a scare that was eventually found to be that the student did not have any weapon, but we went into a full lockdown like there was a weapon in the building. And I actually was home with COVID at the time. And what was crazy was that I literally had the police scanner app on my phone and was texting all my colleagues who were literally hiding, like 50 kids in the art kiln, and
Wow.
texting them the updates that were coming over the police scanner app because it was so intense. And I think that there's a lot of baggage that came after that. And it does make you, I hate that I have to think on a daily basis, how is my classroom set up for safety? What is the way, like I just put a desk in a place, like a table, and I was like, ooh, that would be a good table to push in front of the door if I needed to. That sucks. Like that's the
Yeah, not
worst.
cool.
That is the
Mhm.
worst job thing ever. And another colleague literally has a picture next to the door of a good way to secure the door and like a plan of like when, if we needed to, this is how we're going to put stuff in front of the door. And like that is too much. Like that's where I'm lost, where I can't, I have no words of what to do next.
There's that, the real, like, again, specific external episodes that, of course, go through, I think, all of our minds. But I do think more about, like, in terms of safety, I do think more about psychological safety for the students and for the staff members. People are not well. And that doesn't mean like in a dangerous way. I'm just like, we're not in our best thinking because we're not well. And that has always concerned me, and but has really increased. And then kind of our lack of understanding too of stress responses. So like when we have done like the formal safety training and they're like no matter what, leave or whatever, and I'm like, well, okay, if there's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, like we're all going to react different. And I have always have an example of like literally in our classroom between my teaching partner and I, like one day the microwave kind of like started on fire. It was like we're heating up our lunches, microwave was like, sparks, but whatever. She comes running out and is like, "Oh my god, the microwave's on fire." And I'm like, and I go running in to be like, "Well then unplug it." And we were just laughing being like, that's a great example of just a stress response, and we've seen the same thing when we've had to break up a physical altercation between students. Like she ran to the phone, and again, no judgment. Like her response was like, run this way. Mine was run this way, and so I think about too how almost like that's never a part of it. And whether it's for the active shooter or not, or in general, again, as a community, we don't spend a lot of time talking about what does psychological safety mean to us, how would we respond, what would we do, what are we seeing in our kids, what do they see from us, that kind of stuff.
Well, me personally, that that it gives me anxiety, and I don't even have anxiety, to be honest. And like I said, I'm not at a school every day, but one day I got caught at a school where I had to do that trainer shooting where we all had to hide in a room, and it was just quiet and just sitting there think like, what if this was real? Like, where would I go? What could we do? So just to and then to think about some of the kids that I work with that bring some of that life psychological things on, and then add on top of that, I just I don't know. It's a lot to think about. So me, I personally, I do stay alert of those things, but I don't intentionally watch the news. I don't pay attention to social media like that because I have to keep my peace. That's the only way I keep my
Mhm.
peace. So yeah,
Gotta
it's
protect yourself emotionally.
yes, that psychological safety. I've never heard that, but
Mhm.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah, Amy, we want to thank you again for sending in your story. I think it really took this to a deeper level, a very real place about what's happening this year, both in terms of the trauma that we're dealing with, as well as the ideas and energy, like we mentioned before, of everybody who is still there, who's bringing these ideas to connect people together and to build communities. So thank you.
Well, guess what, fellow podcasters? It is time already to wrap it up. So, thank you everybody for listening. We appreciated you being with us and sending in your stories. And if you're an educator, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know any questions you have, and we can field them right here on the show. We also welcome stories from current educators like Amy, who sent hers in, because we want to give a window to people about what is really happening in our profession. You could record a voice memo or type it up. Just send it to education@pbswisconsin.org and make sure you put AKA teacher in the subject line. You could also check out the AKA Teacher podcast website to find helpful resources connected to today's episode. See you next time.